Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's workshop. My name is Moin Varani, and I'm a member under the Aga Khan Economic Planning Board for the UAE region. On behalf of the chairman and the SkillUp committee, I welcome you all today. We would like to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedule and joining us for today's SkillUp workshop. SkillUp is a volunteer initiative under the AKEPB, and with the mandate to roll out monthly interactive workshops focused on skills upgrade. These workshops may be relevant to professionals and for small and medium-sized business owners, presented by qualified subject matter experts. We're delighted to present today's webinar, which will focus on how to freelance and earn supplementary income. This two-part series will cover ways to earn extra income, in-demand skill sets, and how to be successful in the gig economy in the United Arab Emirates. The agenda for today's webinar will be an introduction of the panelists, followed by their presentation. Once again, thank you for joining us today. It is now my privilege to introduce our speaker for today. His name is Kamran Pirwani, and Kamran is actually from Memphis in the United States. And we are very fortunate that he's joining us all the way from the US. Just to give you a quick background about Kamran, Kamran is a senior software engineer at Brightwheel. He is also the founder of FireCamp, which is an agency he started recently. Kamran is a senior software engineer and entrepreneur from Memphis. He has been working in various roles in the technology industry for the past 6 years for established companies like Brightwheel and Zynga. Kamran is, as I mentioned, the founder of FireCamp, a full-service digital agency where he freelances and manages a team of remote workers in his spare time. Kamran has been working remotely for the past 2 years. And for now, I will let Kamran to take it over from here. Once again, thank you, Kamran, and I hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mon, for that. Let's get started. Well, Yalimalat, everyone. Thank you for having me. Today, we're going to be talking about how to become a freelancer. I'm going to dive into a few different areas, such as what is freelance? What are the benefits? Why would you want to do it? What are the downsides? How do you go about finding a freelance gig or job? What platforms do you use? What tools do you need to know? And things related to that matter. So moving on, let's get started by talking about my journey into freelancing and the whole process for me. So I started this journey about 2 years ago. Throughout this whole journey, I've had a full-time job. So for me, freelance was a night and weekends thing. The initial motivations were, how do I make passive income? How do I start making money on the side outside of my day job, right? So that's kind of how the journey started. For me, particularly, it started with me making mobile apps, websites, products, things like this. Afterwards, it transitioned into me working with a few clients that were in my network. This happened to go decently well, but a problem that I was seeing was, I wasn't getting consistent contracts. So maybe I work with somebody, the project is a month, and then I don't have a project for 1 or 2 months, right? So that was one of the first things I was realizing when I was starting this journey. As I started to grow into this, get more contacts, talk to more people, I started analyzing how much time is it going to take for me to manage the whole process. How much time does it take to find a client, to do the project management, to deliver the work, versus my full-time job, right? Because at this stage, I was really trying to understand, do I keep my job or do I move into freelance full-time, right? So this was an analysis I was doing for a large period of time, right? After analyzing, I found that, okay, despite all of the downsides, for my personal use case, it was valuable. So I started transitioning more into taking contracts, gigs, things like that. Once I was pretty familiar with the landscape, the company that I had owned at the time, we were building products. We started transitioning into an agency itself. So, the agency I have now initially was the team building products to now shift it to freelance full-time, right? So This took about 2 years to get here. So I'm going to talk about, the journey and why it took so long. And so something I want to call out here is everyone has a different tolerance to risk. For me, given how freelance is not guaranteed, consistently finding jobs, it made a lot of sense to me to de-risk that and slowly go through the journey, right? There's no rush to quit your job to make a drastic change. This is something that is happening in nights and weekends. So, everyone has a different tolerance, but that was a journey for me. And that's what I would recommend for people who haven't done it based on the poll, is to slowly ease into this. So let me continue now and talk about a few takeaways. So the first one here is perseverance, right? So something I didn't talk about through this journey, but there were a lot of failures, right? There was a lot of times where I started an initiative in nights and weekends, whether it was, e-commerce or products or contracting, and things didn't go well, right? So I think, if you want to set up income on the side, there's going to be some things that you have to give up. And mostly in this case, it's time. So you have to be really good at managing your own time, right? When I was doing this, you can imagine everyone has a very busy life. Everyone has families. So, you have to find the right balance of working, then working part-time, and then managing those things. So you have to be very meticulous and cut out the things that don't make sense for you. For me, that was social media and other things, right? The next thing is risk. So as I mentioned before, there are ups and downs with freelance, and we'll get into that. But the risk for most people is often too high to quit a job and go into finance, go into freelance. As you'll see on the slides ahead, the hourly rates and billable rates for freelance are oftentimes maybe higher than what you'll make in your full-time job, but they're not guaranteed to be steady. So this is a level of risk that, until you feel like you're able to get a good cadence of clients and people to work with, it's something you should consider doing, maybe overlapping with what you're doing day to day. The last thing here is growing your skills. So when it comes to freelance and you're working on a specific project or for a specific client, there's going to be a lot of times where you're going to have to learn things that you don't know right now, right? So for example, from my understanding, most of the people here have a finance background. In that situation, you're going to be doing things that you might be not doing in your day job. Let's say in your day job, you're doing something like bookkeeping and you're managing the books for the company, and you work for a client where, he's asking you to help with managing books and credits, debits, things like that. You're going to probably then get asked of, hey, this is my company structure. Like, can I save money on taxes? How should I handle payroll? You're going to get questions to a lot of things you might not know how to do. So I think it's really important when you're thinking about contracting and consulting, you should also think about, am I ready to take on a lot of learnings? Am I ready to do a lot of research and a lot of diligence in other areas that's not directly related to what my industry is? Cool. So let's go on to the next one. So I'm going to cover here a few different ways to make extra income in 2020. We're going to focus on the last one, which is freelance contracting, but I'm going to briefly touch on these because, maybe freelance contracting is not for everyone. So I'm just going to actually walk through them, and then, everyone can make a best decision on what they think is best for them. So the first one here is blogging slash podcasting. So what this basically is you have some topic. Let's say, for example, I really enjoy working out, right? So I would have a blog where I write articles about, how to maintain good weight and how to eat healthy, things like that. And then when you reach a certain point where you have people coming onto your website, you can then make money through affiliate marketing, right? You can then put other people's products in here. And so let's say I have a content about, how to eat healthy. And in the middle of it, I have an ad for a keto diet, right? So I'm advertising someone else's product. So this is one area. So this gives you a lot of independence on what kind of content you want to write, what kind of things you want to touch on. You're in complete control of it, right? The next thing here is an ebook. So this is getting a bit more and more popular in this day and age. The strategy here is to look on Amazon or other websites and do research on what topics are hot right now. And then you can write a book around that and try to ride the wave of, right now, a point in the past, certain diets were very famous, certain topics. And so you can base your writing around those things. And so writing an ebook. The next thing here is e-commerce. So I'll briefly touch on this. This one goes pretty deep, and there's a lot of different kinds of e-commerce. There's drop shipping, there's fulfillment by Amazon. So what does this mean? This is the idea of sourcing goods external to you, right? So maybe buying something online from AliExpress or somewhere else, and then selling them on your store. So you would do the marketing, the branding, the sales side, and then the inventory would go from the vendor to the customer. So an example of this, so this is an e-commerce store that my company launched a few months back. So an example of this is, we're selling products for women, and so this is sourced from AliExpress. And so we find it, we make the website, we put the listing together, and then we have reviews, right? And then the process is you make ads on Facebook and you kind of sell that way. So you don't ever touch any of the inventory, right? So it's a very low risk, low cost business to start. This is a very saturated space, so I want to say that. Nowadays you have to get very creative with what you want to sell in order to do this. A lot of times people have to white label a product, which can be expensive. So I want to caveat that, like it's good, but you have to do a lot of research before going into that. The next thing here is creating and selling a course. So this could be, picking an area that you have domain expertise in, right? It could be accounting, it could be, building a product, it could be making a website, and then designing a course around it. So many people sell courses like this on Udemy or other platforms like that. So this is something, if you have domain expertise in an area and you feel comfortable creating content, this might be a good area for you. Affiliate marketing. So we've kind of touched on this already in the blogging podcast. There's lots of different variances of this, so I won't dive too deep, but this is effectively promoting someone else's product, selling it, and making a commission from it, right? So if I give you an example of this, so this was some work that we had done for a client a few weeks ago. So he was promoting the keto diet, right? So he made this website. When you click on this, it goes to the actual product he wants to sell. So he's going to get a commission off of each product sold through his website. So there's a lot of different variations of affiliate marketing, but that's effectively what it is. The next thing here is influencing. So social media itself has a lot of avenues for you to also monetize, right? If you have an audience, if you have something people are following you for, right? If you have an Instagram handle where you post food recipes, then you have a lot of people who are interested in that. You should think about potentially talking to other partners about sponsoring their products on your channel, right? This can happen on a YouTube, on an Instagram, on TikTok. Every social media has an outlet for this. So this effectively allows you to be very independent, right? If you like posting about specific kinds of content, you can continue doing that and then sprinkle in any sort of advertisements or placements. So, this is a good one for flexibility. The next one here, social media management / agency. This has an overlap with contracting and freelance. So what this effectively is saying, and this is more marketing focused. So what this allows you to do is you can manage somebody else's social media for them. And what does that mean? All the posts, all the content, right? Let's say I have a dentist office in the UAE and I need somebody to manage, keeping customers up to date, posting content, finding new customers, right? Businesses always want to find new customers and they will pay you for this. So the model for social media management is you would go to a business who needs customers, you would tell them that you can get them more customers via marketing, social media ads, and then you would sign some sort of retainer for them. Okay, dentist office, for $2,000 a month, I will get you X customers, and that's how you would approach that, right? So this is becoming very famous these days too. You'll see a lot of courses selling how to start a social media management agency. So just some advice there is, I think there's a lot of scams in this too. So you have to be very careful that you're buying content that makes sense for you. The next thing I'll touch on a little bit very briefly for the sake of time, buying and selling domains. I know a few people who do this pretty successfully. This does require technical knowledge about SEO. This does require, you know, some upfront capital. Sometimes buying a domain can be expensive. So, you know, this is not, I'm putting it on the list, but this is not something I recommend for somebody who does not have experience or understanding with what I've mentioned before. Cool. Yeah. And the next thing is freelance contracting. So this is what the focus of we're going to talk about today is. This is effectively trading time for money, right? So you have a skill that you're providing to somebody, and then they're going to pay you for that skill, whether it's hourly or weekly or monthly, so on and so forth. Cool. Awesome. So let's get into the benefits of freelancing. Some of these might be obvious, but I'll cover them. So the first one here is flexibility. This is probably a normal thing now with the state of the world and the pandemic, but the ability to work remotely, right? Setting your own timelines, working from home. This is a big plus of freelancing. Learning and exposure. So as you work with more clients, as you work with more people, you're going to get exposure to lots of different kinds of businesses, practices, tools, strategies. So this is a really good learning opportunity. You're also going to have to, like I said earlier, you're going to have to learn outside of your comfort zone, right? You're going to have to do things that you normally wouldn't do when you're in a day job where you have a very specific role, right? So, you know, that's a plus. And then increased pay. So if you think about having a full-time job, you have a steady income stream, right? But when you think about freelancing, because it's not steady, you have to account for things like project management, finding your next client, managing expectations, things like this. So typically, people on average charge around 2 times their hourly billable rate to accommodate for these factors. So if and when you get into freelance and things are going well, you should probably try to target this area. You may not start there, but this will be a good place for you to go to make up for all the time you're spending. Let's get into the downsides. And I think these are important to call out. So the first one is typically when you're working with a client, you know, the client has the expectation that you can do everything, right? So it doesn't matter if I hired you to be a designer, I want you to also develop my app, you know? So like the expectation is that the freelancer has a lot of skills, right? The additional expectation is people always, you know, tend to rush things on the contracting side. So most of my contracts tend to say like, what are your timelines? And then they'll say like, I really need this tomorrow, right? So a lot of things can sometimes be high pressure, high crunch. So it's worth calling that out. The next thing I've touched on in a few different ways, but I'll just cover it briefly. This is finding consistent work, right? We'll have periods of time at our agency where for 1 week, no one has a contract, right? 8 people. And we'll have periods of time where, you know, we have too many contracts and we can't take on work. So it's very hit or miss. You're not going to be able to predictably control the flow of how much work you're getting until you reach later stages where you've built up, you know, a good understanding with clients. You have a good network. You know, when you're starting, this is always a problem of finding consistent work. And something that goes hand in hand with that is inconsistent earnings, right? So some months you'll see you might make a lot more than you make in your normal day-to-day job. And other months, maybe you don't make too much money at all from freelancing. So, you know, this is a direct result of being able to find consistent work. Cool. The next thing here is high ambiguity. So like I said, sometimes you're given a task and the client has an expectation of what they want. So I'll give you a very real example of myself. The project I showed you the other slide with the affiliate marketing, this one here, the expectation for us was to design a website for them. So we did the marketing, the content, we designed it. And then a few days later, the client said, you know, why isn't the website live? I don't see it on the internet. So I think that was a very big misunderstanding of what the client had asked for and what we delivered, right? So there's a lot of high ambiguity. You have to be able to have very good composure and very good patience. A lot of times you're going to spend a lot of time on something, you're going to submit it, and maybe the client says, this is actually not what I was looking for, right? So it's always very important to be very clear and upfront with your expectations in writing. The next thing here, it's highly competitive. So depending on what kind of contracts you're looking for, what platforms you're looking on, it's very challenging to find something. I'll give you an example. So, you know, the places we'll cover today are going to be Upwork and platforms. But let's say, for example, you're looking for jobs on Facebook, which there are a lot if you join forums. You'll see that, you know, as soon as a job posting is left on there, there's maybe 100 comments on Facebook with people, you know, giving prices and low prices. And so it's very competitive. So you have to be very mindful of that is what value am I really bringing to the client? And how do I explain to the client that they should pay me this amount, even though somebody else is willing to do it for less, right? So it's a little bit about, you're gonna have to sell yourself going into every conversation. Next thing is benefits. I'll touch a little bit here, but you know, you're not full-time, so you don't have benefits like health insurance and things like that. Cool, let's go into what's in demand. So this is not an exhaustive list. There's a lot of things on here. There's a lot of things not on here that you can go and find on Upwork and other platforms. I'm going to talk about, through my experience, things that have been really high in demand and very easy to fill. So there's a product development spectrum here. This covers everything from design, from product management, engineering, project management, QA, localization. On the marketing side, it's a very wide spectrum too. And so to clarify, QA stands for quality assurance. This is when you're testing something. So for example, if I have a product, and let's say I have a product and it's Zoom, right? And I want to actually test, can 100 participants join this call? So that would be something that would be along the lines of what a QA person is doing. So going back to marketing here, this is a very wide array of things, but you know, you can think of content writing, SEO. So this stands for search engine optimization. Copywriting. This is when you're writing content. So maybe for an ad, or maybe for a landing page or a product. Social media management, we talked about this. Ads. This is the technical capacity of optimizing an ad. So what I mentioned earlier is when you do social media management, you tell somebody you can give them more customers, right? You do this through the process of making an advertisement. So this is what the second one would be: understanding how to make an ad, how to optimize the ad, things like that. The next thing here is WordPress. So I think this is a very interesting one, and we'll talk about this more on the next slide. But a lot of times people want really fast, quick websites, and they can't find this functionality easily in, like, you know, a Wix or a Squarespace. And these are really fast ways to build websites. So WordPress, I think, is a good avenue for people who want to start making passive income, who don't have experience on anything on this slide. So I'll talk more about that on the next one. And then Shopify. And this is for e-commerce. Cool. And then on the other list here, I'm not going to go through everything because I think they're self-evident, but there's a lot of things on the list. It can be, you know, accounting, finance, tax strategy, legal, you know, virtual assistant, and lots of things not on here. So I do recommend to go on the platforms, go take a look at all the skills, and first see if your existing skill matches up to something. And if it doesn't, then you can consider doing something else. Cool. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but if you think about a given project, you're probably going to have to use more than a specific skill when you're working on that project, right? The first project I showed you, the keto diet, consisted of SEO, search engine optimization, marketing, and design, right? There's a few pillars of that. The social media one, you know, making ads for somebody, you sometimes have to create the ad. That means design it, right? You have to write the copy for it, and then you have to publish it on Facebook or Google, and then optimize it, right? So there's a few things that go into there. Same thing with designing and developing, same thing with branding, right? So I just want to highlight the actual intersection of projects. Okay, so let's walk through some numbers. I want to preface this conversation with, these numbers here are numbers of people on the platform, but these people have experience, right? You might have freelancers who have established, built up portfolios and projects, right? So when you're picking a skill that you want to go into or an industry that you want to freelance for, I wouldn't just look at these raw numbers here. You have to find the best intersection of your own skills and the prices that are here and the skills here. So for example, in design, some of the softwares that you have to know, depending on the client, you might be using Figma or Sketch or Adobe. If somebody doesn't have a design background, so I've put some learning curves here. This is if somebody's starting from zero, how much time would it take to actually become proficient in this skill? I think design is a particularly challenging one because there's a technical aspect of learning how to design in the tool, right? Learning Photoshop or learning Sketch or Figma, but there's also a very creative aspect, right? Just because you know these tools doesn't mean you'll be able to be a good designer, right? I know a lot of these tools, but when I actually do something, my designer changes everything. So there's some innate skill here. The next thing here is engineering. So this is a very high learning curve. And most of the time, whenever you pick up a task for this, you're expected to know a lot of verticals outside of what you know, more than normal. If you look here, the hourly rates and the averages here are the highest on the chart, but this is not something I recommend somebody going into freelancing for if you don't have prior exposure to development. I think it'll be challenging to navigate that. The two on the bottom here, I think are worth highlighting. So the marketing and project management, I think these are both very, very good areas for newcomers to come in. If you see that you don't have any skills outlined here or on the slide above, and you're looking for something to get into, these are very low learning curves, and the pay associated is very, very good in accordance with that, right? So project managers, what is this really doing? If you imagine, you're working at a company and you want to launch a product. So I'll use, Zoom as an example again, right? And maybe for Zoom, we want to add a feature where, I can have a filter and maybe I can change what's happening on the video, right? So there's a team working on this and you have to manage the team's timelines. You have to manage when we're going to release something, when we should work on something, who is working on what, and things like that. So you're going to use the tools that I've listed below for this. But the learning curve here is not very high. You'll have to learn a few frameworks, just read about them, and kind of, it's something you can easily pick up and learn. So this is a good one for people who are not, don't have the background.
Kamran, since you're talking about project management, we actually have a question here.
Yeah.
Do you follow any project management methodology in your projects?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's typically a few different processes. Some people follow Kanban. Some people follow like an agile framework. Most technology companies in this day and age will follow an agile framework. And I'll touch a little bit on what that means. If you think about, let's say if you think about building, a Zoom again, sorry. So the process of that happens very incrementally, right? Step one is maybe let's build a product where Moen and I can video chat together. Right. Step two is now let's build a product where we can have multiple people and maybe we can have screen sharing. And so you kind of do that slowly. So that's what agile is breaking those up into small chunks, right? The alternative approach, which is very old, is called waterfall. Some people still use it, but this is where you do everything all at once, right? So you build the whole Zoom all at once. The problems with that is, sometimes when you're building a product for consumers, you don't know what they want. So you end up building something and you spend a long time on it and you're not sure if they're going to like it. So it's always better to de-risk this and to do an agile framework. So the next one here is on the marketing side. So I think there's a lot of things here for people who don't have any direct skills to pick up, right? WordPress is a technology that you can use to build websites very easily. You can click a few buttons and drag things around. You don't need any coding. Right, so this is often a very, very high in demand, lots of jobs, but also very easy to pick up, right? Another one here, if you look at Canva, so we're actually, if you look at this here, we're actually using Canva, right? So this presentation that I've made was actually made in Canva. So there's a lot of things that you can actually pick up that are very easy to learn. Okay, going back into the presentation, search engine optimization. This is for somebody who's a little bit more technical and is comfortable reading things. This is a really good one because the billable rates are very high for this once you learn a lot about it. So if you feel like you like reading and being up to date with the latest trends and are a little bit technical, this is a very good one to explore. I'm going to move on to the next slide. And I want to touch on one more thing here, which is no matter which industry you pick, no matter which vertical you pick, you're going to have to continue learning, right? The question Moen asked me a second ago was like, what frameworks? This has really changed over the past few years. And you have to keep up to date with the latest trends, even if it's within your industry. So I just want to call that out as it's a continued journey. Okay, cool. So how does somebody get started in this? So the first thing here is you want to choose a niche. So you want to choose an area that you want to focus in. I recommend to always pick one area first, see how it is, see how it's working for you, and then you can think about doing something else as well. So pick a niche, get very clear on what you're offering and what your prices are, right? So maybe in the beginning, I showed you a slide a few weeks ago of the average pricing. And I told you on average, people bill 2 times their salary. This is not something you're going to be doing in the beginning. And I'll show you an example of that, right? So you have to get clear on your service offering and pricing. The next thing you should think about are what kind of contracts do you want to work on? What kind of people do you want to work with? Who is your ideal client? Do you want to work for a small business, a medium business, a large company, right? That's something that you're going to have to think about as well. I'm gonna go in, yeah, okay, cool. The next thing here is where can I find clients? So this is not an exhaustive list. There's a lot of platforms out there daily. I'm gonna give you a list of some of the popular ones, but I definitely recommend doing some research, doing some diligence here. I'll walk you through the one I use, but there are more than what's on this list. So the first one is gonna be Upwork. These platforms are more or less the same. So Upwork, Fiverr, Marketplace.ae, GoFreelance.ae, Dubizzle. Moen is going to talk about some legalities and how to get set up a few slides down the road. But in the UAE, all of these will have that process that you have to actually get set up. So these are some platforms that you can use. They have a lot of daily, they have a lot of projects being posted, hundreds come in minutes. So there's a lot of liquidity here. The way it works is you sign up for this service and then the service will take some fee, right? So depending on how much you've actually built, the service will take up to 20% of that, right? So the longer you work with the client, the longer you work with a specific client, the less money they take. And then the next outlet here is social media. This might be something more challenging to do in the beginning or for somebody who does not have a professional background. This would entail, being on Facebook, on Reddit, on LinkedIn, and just doing networking. So I'll give you an example. When I go, let's say I'm looking for somebody who's gonna do accounting for my company, and this is something I did a few months ago. So I went and I posted on Facebook groups and accounting groups and said, hey, I'm looking for an accountant, right? And this is a very common practice. You can join Facebook groups and industries that you care about, and you'll see every now and then that there's jobs posted in there. So Facebook is a good one. LinkedIn is a good one, right? And then this one might be less applicable because I think most people here are in the finance background, but Slack, Discord, they have many groups of job postings that you can look up. For me personally, our agency roughly does 50% of the work on Upwork and 50% comes from, LinkedIn and in-network. So I think just to give you an idea of like where most of the clients come from, but I think if you're just starting out and you don't have a track record, I think picking one of these platforms is the best way to go. The only thing I will say about Fiverr on here, I would not recommend starting on here. I think the competition is very high and the prices are very low. So, you know, it takes time to establish that portfolio on Fiverr. So I would go with an Upwork, a Go Freelance.ae, a Dubizzle first. So let's do a quick demo and let me show you a few things on Upwork and how a setup profile and portfolio can look like. Okay. So if you look here, we have the UAE Upwork here. This just really shows, you know, a few freelancers that are doing well. And if you look here, like you have people, somebody's doing design work, you know, somebody's doing data science work, development, you know, Google Ads, e-commerce. If you go through this list, you'll see that, you know, there's so many things I haven't mentioned on my slides. So, you know, you're more than welcome to go on here. The hourly rates are very different, right? So you ultimately need to decide what value that you want to bill for. So I wouldn't get too focused on these numbers right now, but yeah, so this is the current one in UAE. So let's go to my profile. I've only been on Upwork for about 2 months now. So this profile is pretty new. And let me kind of walk you through the important aspects of setting up a profile. So the first thing I have here, if you look at my profile, I actually have a few different kind of contracts work that I do. I do some mobile development, right? And I have a mobile profile here, and I do graphic design, which is a different profile, right? So these are managed independently. All the content for this is independent, right? So if you look here, I have a pretty straightforward, very like concise list of the services that I'm offering. If you go down a bit, you'll see my portfolio. So this one's really important. This is where clients are going to come a lot and see, you know, what have you done? So you're going to have to post your work here. This portfolio for me is more based on design. But let's say, for example, you're someone on the finance side and you think, well, you know, this makes sense for you because you made something, but how do I show my work, right? So it's all about getting creative with how you showcase your portfolio. If you're, for example, again, in the accounting industry, you can show an example of, you know, you can make a fake Excel sheet with, you know, you balancing someone's books and like you making a template of what the actual mechanics of that is. And you can put that on here as your portfolio. You can take screenshots. You can say, hey, I'm going to actually manage your bookkeeping. I'm going to manage your strategy. This is how I do it, right? So just because you don't have something traditional like design to show doesn't mean you can't have a good portfolio. So that's what I want to call out. If you go on a lot of these successful ones here, you'll see that they actually have that. And then when you go to the ones that are not successful, they don't have that portfolio. So in the beginning, you have to take the time. You have to take, even if it takes 20, 30 hours, you have to make that portfolio. A big question I get asked a lot is, well, I don't have anything to show. You know, I haven't worked on anything. How do I build this portfolio? And I think that's a really good question. And I'll give you the example of the designer that's working at my company now, right? She before was working in the food and beverage industry, and now she's a designer. So how did she make that transition? Well, when she came to me and said, I want to do this, she didn't have anything to show me. So I told her, hey, why don't you go mock something up and come back? And she came back and she made 4 or 5 examples of, you know, friends or family businesses and just helped them with things. Some people used it, some people didn't. But the end purpose was, hey, Karman, this is my skill. So you need to find a way to show your skill. It doesn't mean you have to work with real clients, right? You can make something up as long as the work is genuine, as long as the process is genuine, you can use that to showcase. Cool. So those were a few things I wanted to touch on. Yeah, so if you look here, like when you make your portfolio, you want to keep everything really clean and really organized, right? Like somebody should be able to come in here. A client who wants to hire you is not going to spend too much time on your page. They'll click on your page, they'll browse through, within 15 or 20 seconds, they're off, right? So you have a very small amount of time to actually impress your client. So only put your best work on here. If you feel like something you've done, you want to show, but it's not amazing, I would recommend not putting it on there. The next thing I'll briefly touch on portfolio is having a website, right? So this is a website of a woman who's actually selling, you know, branding, presenting, designs, graphics, things like that. Depending on where you're planning on getting your clients, this step initially may or may not be necessary. In today's day and age, it's always, you know, good to have a website, always good to have a an idea of like, who is Moin Virani? You go to moinvirani.com and you see that. If you're planning on starting on Upwork, I think this is not required. If you're planning on going off and doing LinkedIn and other things, this becomes more important, right? And you can use things like Wix or Squarespace or WordPress to build your website, right? So I'll give you a good example. Let's say you wanted to start learning WordPress and that was something that you wanted to charge clients for. Why not make your own website about yourself first in WordPress, learn it, and then you can show that to clients and also use that to get more clients, right? So always find ways of where you can do work for yourself and you can show people. Okay, cool. Let's go back to the slides. So I'm going to touch a little bit on the different kinds of contracts. When you go on Upwork and other places, you typically have a fixed price contract. This means I am a client and I want to spend $500 on redesigning a website, and that's it. This could mean that I want to pay you hourly for your services. So the client will typically put up a range. You know, I want to pay between $20 and $30 for this. And then you would go and actually, you know, give them a proposal. Hey, how about you do this for 25, right? And so the client will then accept or deny that. The next thing here is weekly retainer. This basically means that you're not paid hourly, you're paid weekly. So maybe, you know, you make $500 a week and this is your task. So this is a common one for like very long-term engagements where a client wants to keep you on. This is actually a pretty normal one for accounting. So you'll see that a lot of the accounting jobs have weekly retainers, which is, hey, I want to pay somebody, you know, $300 or $400 a week, and I want them to be around if I need any support from them, and they'll be doing less amount of work, right? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of clients you'll come across. And I've picked specific examples to illustrate a few points here. So let's talk about Bill. You know, Bill has a job that he put up. He doesn't really understand what he wants to make. He just wants something done, right? So I've seen this client a lot where the client asks me for something. I tell them what I'm going to give them. They say yes. I do the work. And then afterwards, the client's not happy. And they don't want to hear excuses, right? The next kind of client is, you know, Sue. This is really your ideal client. Somebody who comes into the picture, they're very organized. They know exactly what they want. They have an idea of how long it'll take, and they like to work together, right? And the third one is for Marie, right? Marie thinks she wants a candidate A, but she kind of wants candidate B and C, like they have multiple skill sets. This is very common. Like I told you before, somebody hiring me for a designer, really wanting a developer, or somebody hiring an accountant and also wanting a tax strategist, and things like that. So why is this important? It's important because what you'll come to realize is you have to really treat each client independently. You have to be very accommodating, very catering to them. One of the things that I do, which I think has been successful for me, is selective billing. So once you start charging the clients more and more money and you're getting closer to your 2x hourly rates, you have to really think about what it means to bill a client, right? You can't bill a client for everything. If you're being hired as an accountant and you're expected to know something, and then you spend 3 hours doing research on something, you should think about if you want to bill for that or not. It's a personal choice. Some clients might see and say, oh, like Moen did 10 hours of work, but what did he really do, right? So you have to be careful about that. So this is something in the beginning, I always selectively bill. And then as time goes on, I kind of decide what makes most sense. So this means that you're decreasing your hourly rate in order to please a client. The next thing here is adjacent knowledge. I've touched on this a few times. I won't dive too deep, but you need to have a learning mentality, right? Sometimes when I work on projects, I finish the project and the client then asks me, hey, can you also do this? And I say, yeah, even if sometimes I don't know how to do it, I say, yeah, and then I learn the skill and I do it. And this establishes a relationship with me and the client where he feels comfortable, he or she feels comfortable and comes to me for different things, right? This happens all the time. So you have to be very open to getting out of your comfort zone. This is very important if you want to be successful in this field, in this area. Cool. The next thing here is really, really important. Catering your working style. This happens all the time to me. I've worked with maybe 70 different clients in different parts of the world, and every client is so different. And the reason I say that is everyone has different ways of working with you. Everyone has different ways of how much information should I share with them, what's important, what's not. So you have to be very careful. You have to have your own process where you always communicate very thoroughly. You're always very upfront with expectations, right? You get work done in a timely fashion, things like that. But there's some other things that are going to vary between clients. So you have to be very mindful. You have to be able to talk to a person, understand their personality, understand how to cater to them. It's very, very important if you want to have a long-term client. The next thing on the right side, this is a pretty common phrase: under promise and over deliver. So a lot of times when I'm working with a client, I tell them that the task is going to maybe take 2 or 3 more days, and it will, and then I'll finish the task before that. And this is because I never want to miss a deadline. I never want to tell the client I'll have something Friday and I don't have it Friday, right? So this is really important for client expectations, which is, are you getting things done like you're saying you are, right? So I think this is important too. So let's go over a few tips on how to increase your chances of success. So as I mentioned, the space is competitive. There's a lot of people who, you'll see a job gets posted and a few minutes later, it might have 5 or 10 proposals, right? So how do we actually increase the chance of success? So the first one I've touched on is building a comprehensive portfolio. This is really important. Even if you don't have the experience, even if you don't have clients, you have no excuse to not have something, right? If for example, again, I'll go back to the accounting example because I think the majority of people do that here. If I hadn't worked with a client, I would go into my family business and say, hey, can you give me some examples of what your books look like? And then I would make something similar and try to find ways to optimize that and use that as a piece. Or maybe I actually do the work for them and show that, right? So you can also do some projects for free, right? If you're having a really hard time. So this is not a strategy I recommend on Upwork because it's against their guidelines. But if you're doing more of like on the Facebook, on the LinkedIn, if you don't have that background and you feel confident in your skills, you can tell them that, hey, I'm okay doing a trial period for free, right? So this is not the entire project that takes you a month. This is, I will work for you for free for 1 or 2 weeks or whatever you're comfortable with, right? And the client can assess your skill and then give you the project, right? If you do that situation, you need to be very careful to sign all the paperwork, right? A lot of times people say, I'm going to do it for free, and then it doesn't go anywhere. So you need to sign some sort of paperwork. The next thing here is until you have a lot of testimonials, you're going to have to reduce your rate. I think I can give you an example of this one. So there was a client that I work with now. And when we started this project, the billable rate was, $40 an hour. It was a lot lower than what it is now. And that was because I didn't have any testimonials on Upwork. I didn't have a profile. So you have to be willing to decrease your rates initially to get work, right? Until you build up a few testimonials, until you build up that presence, you're gonna have to do that. The next thing here I think is really important. A lot of time people get into this industry and they get very disheartened. Kamran, I've messaged like 40 people and no one has responded to me and I don't really know how to find a contract, right? So I want to give you some insights into my journey. I got on Upwork 2 months ago. I had a pretty good background, experience, exposure, portfolio. I did all those things, right? And I sent at least, I think it was 87 proposals on Upwork. These were custom proposals. Each proposal I wrote by hand. It was not copy pasted, and I didn't get a response. 87, right? And then a week went by, I didn't hear anything. And then I sent 15, 20 more. I finally got my first contract, turned into a larger contract. So it's like, you have to be very persistent. What you should do is we can get into this in the next workshop, but there's lots of alerts you can set up. Hey, a job was posted with this criteria. You should go on there and reply immediately. A lot of times, most of the hiring that happens on the platform either happens within that first hour or it happens within a few days. And this is data coming from Upwork. So there's a big advantage of you responding immediately. Most of the contracts I've closed have been like posted 1 hour ago. There's only 10 proposals. They see mine, they do it, right? So this is really important. The next one here I touched on, it's being more personal, right? A lot of mistakes people make is they have a cover letter and they copy and paste it to 50 clients, and it's really long and it's hard to read, and no one likes that, right? I've posted jobs on Upwork, and I've seen this as well. So many, like 80% of the people coming in do this. This is not a good strategy. It might even be better to say something very light, very short and to the point. Like, hey, I know you want to make your website on the keto diet. I really like, the fitness space, and I really try to stay healthy. And that's it. And your portfolio itself can speak for itself. So they'll click on your name, they'll go to your portfolio. You don't have to do too much selling on the cover letter or on the proposal, right? If you have something very specific that you want to share with the client, you can do it here, but don't say the same thing that you have on your portfolio. Keep those as separate pieces. Okay, the next thing here is, so being a subject matter in a specific area, right? So I've seen a lot of people will say, wow, like I can make $50 an hour in accounting, and I can also make it doing the virtual assistant, and I can also do this. In the very beginning, you should stay very focused. You should pick one thing. You should outbound to those kinds of clients. You should build that portfolio. You should build that reputation, right? I think that's really important, is not to get too scatterbrained and just stay focused. Cool, I'll hand it off to Moen to talk about legality.
Sure, thank you, Kamran, for the insightful presentation. For anybody in the UAE who wants to start freelancing, I just want to give you a caveat that you have to get a freelance permit. There are a lot of options within the UAE where you can get a consultation or work with a company. So here we have gofreelance.ae, and I recommend you to go to this website later on and take a look. With Go Freelance, the cost of getting a freelance permit starts anywhere from 7,500 AED. Step number 1 on the left, as you see, you will need to pay 2,000 dirhams, which is renewed every year. And with that, you get a freelance permit, and you just need to submit a UAE number. And then if you don't have an employment visa, you get an employment visa with that as well. So you have to provide these requirements. So your passport photo, your establishment card, your medical insurance, your visa. If you are currently employed, then what you have to do is you have to get an NOC letter from your employer. So you need to get a letter stating that you are okay to work during nights or weekends on a freelance capacity. So here's a little bit of information for Dubai. There's a lot of different options. If you can go to the next slide, Kamran. So we also have, you can get a freelance permit in Abu Dhabi. In Abu Dhabi, you can work with a company called 2454. This company essentially is offering you freelance permits, and the license fee is waived for the first 2 years, and the cost could be slightly less. So as you can see, the cost starts at 4,500 dirhams per year. And you get some dedicated team that works with you, and sometimes you also get office space. There's also freelance permits that are offered in Ras Al Khaimah, in Fujairah, in Ajman. So we highly recommend you to do your research. You can look this up on Google, and sometimes you can also, if you can go to the next slide, you can also sponsor your dependents. So here are some frequently asked questions. Can I still work if I have a full-time job? Yes, you can work as a freelancer, but like I said, you need an NOC, and this is highly important to get that NOC letter from your employer. You can sponsor your dependents as well. So there's some information about that. And does the 7,500 fee include your visa? No, that is just the cost of the permit. So you would still have to get a residence visa if you don't already have that. And like I said, these networks are very easy to get in touch with. You can call gofreelanceme.ae. You can also visit their office in Dubai Media City. This is part of the TCOM group in Dubai Media City, but you can also go to different, states or emirates within UAE. If you're joining outside of UAE, I would recommend you to take a look at your local laws. So the next slide is going to be talking about payments. Right now, we're only highlighting Upworks.com, but there are a lot of different there are a lot of different platforms that you can work with. Like we mentioned, there is gofreelance.ae, which has its own marketplace. So if you become a member of Go Freelance, you can also get jobs, which could be government jobs or, just local UAE jobs from that platform. You can also sign up on Dubizzle, and there are a lot of different platforms. So you can wire transfer money that goes in from your Upworks account straight to your Emirates NBD account. And all of these options could be worked with on the payments front. With that, I would like to thank you again. Have a great evening. Stay home and stay safe.